Here we go.
Avir harim talul kayayim.
That's a perfect start. Okay, guys, welcome.
So wait, are we putting?
I'm gonna do the intro.
Are we making any announcements, or we're done with that part?
Yeah, I'm doing the intro right now. So tonight is our 9th Westside Wednesdays virtual shir, and our guest speaker is Hillel Fried, who's going to speak on the historic aspects of Yerushalayim in honor of Yom Yerushalayim. Westside Wednesdays, or we call it WSW, virtual shir, is dedicated to Zecher Nishmat Avi Abiner, who passed away around almost a month and a half ago. Abraham Yitzchak Ben Chana, may his neshama have an aliyah. We also daven for the refuah shlema of all those who are dealing with the virus and friends that need our davening now. And there is unfortunately just a ridiculous list. So we have a smaller list. And Panina, I think you want to do the list? We can do it later. We'll do it at the end.
I don't think it's up to date anymore.
I know there's still the people who are on this list. I'll do the list I have right here, and then everyone else is obviously included. So Gimpel Mordechai, Doniel Ben Sarah Ita, Rabbi Shalom Dov Ber Ben Rachel Bela, Abraham Chai Ben Shora Shendel, Baruch Shmuel Ben Chaya Sarah, Miriam Rachel Bat Meital, Shimon Ben Dada, Ben Zion Tzvi Ben Chaya Yehudis Esther, and may they all get better soon. And
Amen.
with that, happy Yom Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is ours. It'll always be ours. And whoever becomes president or stays president will keep it as ours. And with that, in the new election. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hillel. Thank you so much, Hillel, for being our rock for Shirim. Not the Dome of the Rock.
Thanks for having
which is also ours. But anyway.
me.
And our fluffy friend.
Happy Yom Yerushalayim, everyone. Yeah, how about that? Happy Yom Yerushalayim, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to do yet, just simply like what we should be doing, because it's probably going to be a combination of some historical, I guess, recording of Jerusalem in between, some things to do with Torah stories, and also some things to do with maybe some fun facts about Jerusalem, things that I'm sure a lot of you know, maybe some things you know a bit less about. There'll also inevitably be here some advocacy for Israel, just because I think that Jerusalem is actually a very good example that if you actually know the history as much as possible, you'll actually strengthens the Jewish point of view, as we could imagine, because we were in a way there first. But that's not going to be the agenda tonight. That's just gonna, I think, come inevitably. So obviously there's so much to say, and we're definitely not going to obviously even get to the edge of it. But let's start. And let's start actually with something that I'd like you to remember until the end of this year. After that, you can forget about it. So we know that in the Torah, the word Yerushalayim does not appear. It appears as the word of Shalem. That's also a bit of the there are different opinions what Shalem means with Malki Tzedek and other times that it's mentioned in the Torah, but we know that in the Tanakh the word Yerushalayim is mentioned over 600 times, and I'm not even speaking now about other names like Haryon. Sion is also another word that is synonymous to Jerusalem, or Ir Michlal Yofi, Masos Kol Haaretz. Those are also all things, especially from Tehillim. All those are other synonymous names to Jerusalem. In an interesting story that I'm sure you studied at one point or time, in Shmuel Bet, chapter 24, it says about how King David had to was in a way was, I guess, I'm not sure what the word is, but an angel came or the Satan came to King David, and he in a way, got him to count the Israelites at the time, which we know is obviously a no-go. You're not supposed to count the Jewish people. Throughout history, people got in trouble when they did. And so King David counts the Jewish people, and he basically, in the end, the Navi comes to him, the prophet, and he tells him, now because of what you did, you have to be punished. You will either have 3 years of 3 years of famine, 3 months of losing to your enemies, and or 3 days of having a plague. And then David says the famous words, Niflana beyad Hashem ki rabim rachamav ubiyad adam alepola. I prefer falling in the hands of God, for he is merciful, than hands of man. And there's a plague that starts, and making a long story short, what does King David do? And he doesn't know what to do, and tens of thousands are dying. And the angel, he sees an angel in the heaven, and he points his sword towards Jerusalem in a very ominous scene. And King David goes, and by the way, that verse is in the Haggadah, and King David goes to where he's pointing, and he's pointing into what used to be then a farm of someone called Arvana, who was from the people of Yevus, and he understands that he needs to put an altar there and give an offering to God, and that's how the plague will stop. And he gets to Arvana, interestingly enough, like we know that Abraham did, or plenty of other people in our history did. They bought the place with money, and it's like well recorded, so no one could come later on with any claims that it was given as a gift. He buys it from Arvana, and he builds the altar, and he makes a sacrifice there, kind of initiating that this is where God has chosen for being his temple. And the plague stops. And they ask, and this is some Balei Musar say, they ask, so why to begin with was King David thrown to a place where he, like an angel basically pushed him to count when it's obviously it's forbidden. So the answer is, again, this is Balei Musar. There are many answers, but one answer is Balei Musar say, it's because the people of that generation, they weren't yearning enough for Mashiach. And you would think, wait a minute, what do you mean? They had at those days, the Mishkan was in Shiloh, and it's not like we even had an Aron HaBrit, we had a Kohen Gadol, and they say, yeah, but because they didn't yearn for the coming of Mashiach, for God's domain to really be seen in the entire world, and for him to actually have a permanent home, because they weren't yearning enough for that, that's why they got their punishment. So Balei Musar say, if that's the reason, so what could other generations do or say when not only that we don't have Mashiach, but we have so much less of that? Keep that story in mind. We may get back to it if we have time. So basically, just as we know, there was the destruction of the first temple. Then 70 years later, we start coming back. In the end of the century BCE, the temple is built. And in the end of the 4th century, the Greeks conquer Yerushalayim until the Hashmonaim start. And because the Hashmonaim ended up, that's obviously the story of Hanukkah. I'm obviously going through this very quickly. We're going to stop soon, and we're going to kind of go through it and drill in certain areas that could be, we could elaborate on. So once the Hashmonaim, after Hanukkah, and that story of a few decades of being in power, they actually become tyrants, the Hashmonaim, and they become such tyrants that it's recorded that in one instance, Yanai, the king, killed 800 of what we would call sages. So there was a big civil war, if you want, and in the aftermath of that civil war, the Purushim, who we allocate today to sages, to basically the rabbis, right, who we take after, those were actually persecuted by the house of Hashmonaim until they were begging the Romans to come to Israel to save them. So Rome actually, Rome marched into Israel, it actually came in by an invitation by the Jews in the year 63 BCE. So sometimes you have people that come as visitors, but obviously they become enemies. And so the Romans, we know the year 66 CE, the Great Revolt starts. Again, civil war in Israel throughout, and eventually the Romans get to Jerusalem. We could speak about these things another time because it could go on and on. But but what's important to remember is that, again, civil rivalry between different brethren, Jews. They killed each other within Jerusalem, and they actually burnt 20 years worth of supplies of food that they could have had. There were very extreme years of extreme messianic yearning, and a notion that the end of the world is here. And that's something that was characterized actually the first century CE all in all. I mean, that's where also Jesus comes into the story. Jesus was not the only person who was walking around saying he's the Messiah, and not just him and not just